Okay, well, welcome to the concluding webinar for the Community Tech Connect 2.0 project, which is a part of the Digital Literacy Exchange project, which has been funded by the Government of Canada. I'm delighted to have so many people here in the audience, as well as so many different presenters. There's a lot of really wonderful stories and learnings that we're going to have an opportunity to share with you this afternoon. One thing I will mention at the outset is that there will be what I call a question period after the presenters are done. So in the interest of time, if you have some questions, you are welcome to put those in the chat, or if you prefer to just jot them down, we will have an opportunity to go through those when we get to that question period. The other thing I will mention too is that we are scheduled to conclude at 2:30, but I anticipate that we will probably go longer than that on account of the heavy content that we're providing. So if you have a scheduling conflict that requires you to leave at 2:30, please feel free to go. There is no problem with that whatsoever. But if it turns out you do have some additional time to stick around, obviously we welcome that. Okay, well, it is hard to believe that we are now at the point where DLEP is coming to a conclusion. So, as those who have participated in the project know, this is the second go round of this project. It has now been on the books for 7 years, and it has been a wildly successful program. And before I get into the nature of that success, both in terms of our group, but also in terms of overall national success, what I will mention is the importance of DLEP and how DLEP aligns with the universal access principle of Canada's digital charter. And the goal is to support all Canadians in fully embracing the digital economy. And it's a fascinating thing to sit and think about how the emphasis in that statement is on economy, because I think as everybody who is involved, not only in digital literacy training, but in literacy and basic skills work more broadly, you know that the word economy is a term that is very, very broad because it's not just people who are working. It is people who are thinking about working, preparing to work. It is people who have been in the workforce and then because of COVID, which hit during the first go round of DLEP, who suddenly found themselves in a working world where they had to go digital, where they hadn't been digital before, and suddenly found themselves looking at and reassessing their skills. And from that reassessment, asking themselves, okay, what is my relationship to the economy, to the workforce in Canada, and specifically for us here in Southern Ontario? And so there is the economic focus, but there is also something broader as well, which is the Canada's Digital Charter, which if you've ever had an opportunity to look at that charter, there are a number of points in there that I think are worth considering, worth mulling over a little bit. And sorry, my slide jumped on me. So as I mentioned, DLEP was launched in 2018. Up until recently, it had served more than 400,000 Canadians. This is, of course, going to increase pretty dramatically as a result of the data that they are currently collecting. I'm going to talk about our contribution to that, which has truly been stellar. But this gives you an idea not only about the scope, the breadth of this project, but also this has been a coast-to-coast initiative. And so where Canada's Digital Charter is concerned, these are principles that get into not only economics, as I was just discussing, but also education and also civic participation, the ability to be a visible person. And so at the very top of the Digital Charter is the question about universal access, and that connects directly to the purpose of our project. How can we find a way to ensure that every Canadian has access not only to digital skills training, but also to actually create for themselves a digital presence? And if you follow the news, this is an ongoing challenge because we have the questions of how do you provide rural internet? How do you ensure that people who are low income have access to phones, to computers, have access to reliable internet in their homes? If they live in more remote areas, how can we ensure that they will have access to a network as well as a service that has become an integral part, not only of being employable, but also of being visible in modern Canadian society? And as again, everyone here I think appreciates, that also includes how we interact with others in a social sense, how we take advantage of culture, how we bank, how we volunteer, how we access government services, how we file our taxes, and so forth. So universal access is essential. And connected to that, and we have several people who will be able to speak to this today, there's questions about safety and security. Are we able to maintain an online presence safely? Are we confident that the interactions that we have are secure? Do we know how to control and manage our presence online? Do we know or understand what it means to provide consent in the use of different forms, templates, services, interfaces? And connected to that, of course, is the question about transparency, portability, and interoperability. And all of that is, of course, rather lofty language. But when you talk about actually interacting with people, especially people who come from underrepresented groups or at the core of our delivery targets, people who don't necessarily think about themselves as being informed users of social media, for example, even though they've been using it for years, or they're just getting used to online banking, or they are just beginning to understand how to interact with people over long distances or access governmental services via a computer or a phone as opposed to going down to an office. Questions about control and consent, safety and security really become questions that are far from abstract, but are very concrete and very day to day. And I can say on a personal level, I've had many conversations, not only with newcomers to Canada, but also seniors who have had a lot of really very relevant, very pressing questions about how can I be certain that the interactions that I'm having are safe and secure? How do I get my mind around being a digital presence as opposed to going and interacting with someone face to face, or being comfortable using a platform like Zoom, which we're using right now, to interact with a physician or a nurse practitioner? And of course, then too, there's questions about what does it mean to have an open and modern digital government, which is another matter, which I can tell you in my experience with working with some learners, we did actually talk about that a bit. And then connected to these things as well are things like a level playing field. Can we have a level playing field if we don't have universal access to internet? And of course, if we believe in a level playing field and we believe in universal access, what does that mean in terms of collection of data, of digital data for good, information that is stored permanently, but also in the service of the common good? What does that mean in terms of developing and maintaining a strong democracy? What does it mean in terms of protecting ourselves from hate and violent extremism, from being targets? I've had a lot of learners who've talked about that, about their fears regarding being a target in terms of if they misuse a platform. And then, of course, about strong enforcement. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about this because I think not only that the digital charter forms an important backdrop to what we have done, but also because it is in the DLEP mission statement itself. So if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at Canada's digital charter, I've put a short sort of a short URL at the bottom of the slide here. You're welcome to get a copy of the slide deck afterward, but I can also tell you that if you do a search for Canada's digital charter, it comes up very easily on your search engine or if you use AI. All right. Another thing I want to touch on briefly because it is at the core of what we have been working on with DLEP is the digital divide, which is a term that has been floating around now almost for a decade, but of course has gotten a lot of attention, not only just because of the pandemic, but also, of course, renewed attention due to the introduction and mainstreaming of artificial intelligence. And so the digital divide is, in basic terms, essentially the division between those who are fluent or feel fluent using digital technology and those who do not. And that fluency really has to do not only with access to devices and tech, it also has to do with the ability to or comfort with conceptualizing your use of that technology, thinking about yourself as a digital citizen. And while I recognize that that discussion right there can happen at a high level of abstraction, I have been struck, and in my conversations with our partners on this project, I've been struck by the just bevy of really outstanding and quite probing and philosophical questions and points that have been raised by learners who have really done a lot of very careful thinking about what it means to be a digital citizen. What is being asked of us when we go fully digital? What does it mean to increasingly have more interactions with people via computer screen than it does to have those conversations in person? And I think that some of the other folks here can attest to this, that oftentimes the older the learner, the more this conversation transpires because they are accustomed to a pre-digital world, and about how it is often fascinating to have those familiar with a pre-digital world in the same learning environment as those who the digital world has been a formative part of their education. There's some very interesting conversations and interactions that can take place there. Where DLEP is concerned, one of our responsibilities is to narrow that digital divide. And one of the things that I will return to at the very end today is how the digital divide increasingly doesn't just cover our learners, it can cover the instructors and practitioners as well, because we are always working to keep up with the latest changes in software and computer technology, especially as it pertains to artificial intelligence, privacy issues related to artificial intelligence, and the evolving questions that learners are asking about how to integrate new technologies like AI and AI chatbots into their lives, and how AI and how automation is already impacting their interactions in the digital space. All right, so just a quick run through about our project specifically in our service region. So as most of you here know, our project served a 6-county region, which I have very elegantly circled on a map of southwestern Ontario. We cover a very, very large region within the province of Ontario: London, Middlesex, Elgin, Oxford, Brant County, as well as Haldimand, Norfolk. So I think that if you were to drive from one end of our region to the other, depending on the traffic, which is always a factor, I think it's fair to say it would take you about an hour and 45 minutes, sometimes longer. But we cover not only a large geographic region, but a wide diversity of communities. And so I'm very happy with the fact that we have representatives here from a range of different programs who work with people in the City of London, so a large municipality, a large urban municipality, people in St. Thomas, sort of a mid-sized municipality, semi-urban. And then we have a lot of people who serve small towns across this region as well, and even more remote rural areas, who deal with all kinds of matters about transportation, access to services, as well as access to reliable internet. So I think that it's fair to say that our project is serving very much a microcosm of the country at large in terms of the types of communities that we serve. We also serve a large number of Indigenous learners, seniors, women, newcomers to Canada. We have served people with a wide range of economic backgrounds, everything from professionals to people who are living a more marginal existence within the economy. So again, I think from a demographic standpoint, not only in terms of the regions, but also the learners themselves, we cover a true microcosm of the country at large. And so a brief mention about our goals and targets. So over the course of our 3-year project, of which 2 years of that have been delivery, our goal was to deliver 1,022 in-person one-on-one sessions, 118 digital literacy in-person workshops, and 280 hybrid digital literacy sessions, a combination of both in-person and online, with the intention of serving 2,800 learners. So we are awaiting the final numbers for the fourth quarter, but I can say with great pleasure that we have already served, through the end of the third quarter, 3,455 learners. So we have exceeded by a substantial amount our target. And that is absolutely because of the excellence of our partners, whose hard work, commitment, and efforts to expand their service delivery have been heroic. And I am not being hyperbolic when I say that. We have countless times turned to our partners who have been eager to take on additional learners, eager to expand projects, eager to reach communities that they haven't been able to reach before. And it has translated into the numbers that you see here. So I can say, just as someone who has been coordinating this project, that it has been incredibly gratifying for me to work with such a dedicated team who always rise to the challenge and are looking to exceed it. And I think that that really is truly a marvelous thing. Oops, I slid my slide. So thank you to our partners. You have done a really tremendous job. And we have a little, I don't know what we call it, rule mantra in our office. We're always talking about how we don't want to just meet targets, we want to exceed them. I remember one of my executive directors, Tamara Cottery, saying at one point, hitting targets is boring. We want to exceed them. So we're clearly not a boring group. I am very happy to say. So again, thank you to our partners. Okay, so having said all that, by way of a rather long introduction, I would like to introduce the presenters. So the very first presenter we have today is Carolina Cahoon, who is going to be talking very specifically about the importance of developing curricular modules that are accessible so that you can serve a wider range of learners, including those who might have some difficulties with accessing modules that are not designed to help people with neurodiversity or being able to have additional additional functions for people who have some hearing loss or sight loss. And so she's going to speak specifically to the importance of accessibility in the delivery of the Digital Literacy Exchange Project modules. So Carolina, I am very happy to hand the slide deck over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I have a question because I'm joining via mobile. Are you kindly able to share my 4 slides?
Yes.
If they're available?
I certainly
But in the
am.
meantime, while you share that, I'll just get started in the interest of time, if that's okay, simply because the introduction is pretty much the first slide. Hello, everyone. I think I met pretty much everyone. I don't see you all on the phone, but I'm pleased to be here. So today the topic I wanted to speak to you about is on creating inclusive learning environments through technology. And don't worry, we won't speak about accessible websites or accessible documents. No, that's not important, but I wanted to have a different conversation with you. As you know, education is the foundation of progress, yet the rapid pace of technological changes in our world presents a lot of challenges for pretty much everyone, right? For educators, organizations, and it really is getting very, very difficult to keep up with this evolving world. So the question is, can we actually continue relying on traditional teaching methods when there are so many learners facing barriers daily? For instance, approximately 27% of Canadians have reported accessibility challenges. My digital napkin, I created a digital napkin with some of the graphics there, which Jeremy, if you could kindly share that at your earliest convenience on the chat, that will provide you a quick snapshot of the state of accessibility in Canada. And there's also a link in that napkin with more information related to where I got these stats. So I wanted to have a reflection. And when Jeremy invited me to speak about accessibility in learning environments, I realized that many of us have engaged in professional development, again, creating accessible documents or improving online sessions. And I feel that while those efforts are important, I would like to use this time to highlight a broader perspective, one that extends beyond accessible websites, beyond these accessible document sessions, simply because of the times of today. And briefly, it's a call to action for all of us to reflect how technology can empower learners, providing tools that foster really quite a bit of autonomy, equity, and independence. So I want to invite you about these think out of the box solutions that are available right now in the market, because the needs of today's diverse learners demand innovative approaches, because traditional methods no longer suffice, especially if somebody wants to become employed. And in our digital era, inclusive education is not just a vision, it's a necessity to ensure that no learner is left behind and every voice is represented. And we always talk about AI, and this is a huge part of that representation as well, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But again, I'm going to focus right now on some of the technologies that are available. So I would like to move on to the next slide, please. So with immersive technologies shaping accessibility, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but sometimes we don't think about some of these immersive technologies like the availability of VR and AR, which provide safe spaces where learners can practice life skills. So if we can imagine a learner, for example, with a traumatic brain injury as a result of a motor vehicle accident, or a person with autism experiencing, some sort of realistic simulation of navigating a crowded factory, right? This is one clear example of how we can use these technologies for accessibility, or perhaps learning science and math can be interactive and fun with VR. It's actually a preparation for real life and independence, and huge motivators. I know at Literacy Link, we speak a lot about engagement. We talk about that aspect of gamification. And these innovative tools build not only competence, but the confidence to thrive and learn through these techniques. And then a little bit below that, because that's a little bit of a longer slide, Jeremy. There, with wearable technologies. Wearable technologies are transforming everyday learning. For example, smart glasses can overlay crucial information to blind and low vision learners in real time. If we can think about looking ahead, you may have read articles about Elon Musk brain-computer interfaces, which had the potential to empower learners with severe disabilities to control devices with their thoughts. It's actually real. We can think about some improvements, especially in the last year, with voice control, keeping it's just getting better. For example, the technologies are beginning to really interpret atypical speech or accents like mine with much ease. It's actually becoming quite clear. So, and someone with motor and speech difficulties can now program Alexa, for example, to open Zoom meetings with just their voice. And I would like to jump in the next slide, please. And why I titled this Beyond the Classroom? I say this because each of these technologies can be used anywhere, and it's likely you have used them for your personal needs. So I want you to reflect on the tools that are already included in many of your personal devices and software you use. And that includes the learners, right? So we're talking about speech technologies, we're talking about voice commands and real-time transcription or captions that really remove barriers for many. If we can think about our Google phones, the Google Call Assist, or if we use FaceTime, we can read the speech of the person we're speaking with. And there's a lot of advancements with visual assistance, with object and facial recognition, helping many navigate environments independently. I do have a video, which I'm not going to play today, but I'll share this. Jeremy, if you would be so kind, later on, I'll share with you a link to a short video that gives you an example of these advancements and how quickly it is nowadays for a machine to look at even your screen and read to you what is on the screen and provide many descriptions. Text accessibility, we can think about predictive text. We can think about optical character recognition extraction. We can think about the screen readers compatibilities becoming better. With language support, we can think about instant translation and read aloud functions, bridging communication gaps everywhere. For example, take PowerPoint Live. Newcomers can sit in a room and get instant translation of a presentation should they desire to do so. It's very easy to do. Navigation tools, we can think about wayfinding technologies that empower learners with mobility barriers to move confidently through spaces. And of course, as Jeremy mentioned, we can think about AI integrations. For example, did you know that your Microsoft Edge browsers include several HDHD friendly tools? It has the immersive reader, it has tab organizations, it has split screen, and it has Copilot AI, which can summarize or make task initiation easier for many people. Just a couple of weeks ago, for example, I discovered with a deafblind person that Copilot could create a pretty cool descriptive explanation of the transcripts and videos. It was not perfect, but it's getting better. So, right? Like I remember even in the past when I worked with some projects with Jeremy where we were thinking about captions, we were thinking about transcripts and descriptive video. It's becoming better and better with just the click of a button and the right prompt. So what I wanted to share is that in summary, your devices, whether it's a smartphone or a computer or wearable, has so many powerful tools that can not only be used in the classroom, but I feel they are transferable skills in the learners' communities, employments, and their homes. So I would like to move on to the last slide. So I thought to share some potential actionable items, and I know these are not very easy items, but in order to build a culture of digital inclusivity, it's not about training for educators, right? Many teach the way they were taught. This is what I discovered. Workshops on all these technologies and how these technologies support learners' autonomy and success, just explaining the why. Why are we doing things a little bit different? We can think about feedback loops for all. For example, I know that some organizations may already be doing this, but it's actually clear that it's not happening everywhere. So we need to find a way to establish more frequent and meaningful communication channels for learners and educators to voice their technology needs. I feel that in these rapidly evolving times, continuous revision of policies related to privacy, especially with privacy, the laws are evolving, right? That is essential. Privacy, security, especially nowadays with so much fear and uncertainty surrounding the technological advancements that we're facing. Pretty much an open dialogue is critical to help us all better understand and adapt to what these technologies can truly offer, as they have been banned. But if they're banned, we cannot understand them. Digital literacy. Personally, I'm sad to hear that DLEP is not continuing, especially during these trying times when artificial intelligence is impacting us all. I feel that advocating for continuous revisions for the OALCF to ensure that the digital tasks are relevant and that they align with the current needs and trends is essential. And ensure that we can provide more instruction on digital citizenship, responsible technology use, trying to offer more of that support and resources to promote lifelong learning. And finally, the collaborative solutions that I've been reading about, best practices across the world, especially on AI use, and particularly it would be a huge dream of mine. But I strongly believe in forging partnerships between the educators, researchers, technologies, funders, and all the community stakeholders to overcome funding gaps and infrastructure barriers. I faced these in my former roles, for example, by partnering with the University of Waterloo in creating an accessible technology. They had the funding and they were able to collaborate with us. So I think we need more of these talks, more of these opportunities for everyone. to collaborate and develop a curriculum and technologies that prioritize digital equity and education. Because in a world driven by innovation, the way we teach must evolve to reflect the world we wish to evolve. That's all I had to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Much appreciated. And I did put your handout into the chat. So if anybody would like to access that, it is there. So thank you for the opportunity thank you for sharing your insights with us. And like I mentioned earlier, we will have a question period at the end. Now, I recognize the fact that that may prove to be a little bit difficult for you, Carolina, because you may have to leave early, but I'm certainly happy if there are some questions that are directed at Carolina I will try to answer some of those to the best of my ability, but I also can pass those questions along to Carolina as well, so you get the full benefit of her expertise as well. All right, so without further ado, Anita, I believe we have you. I'm actually double checking the agenda because I realized I just had a moment of doubt. Actually, sorry, Alicia Stewart, you are next up. If I could hand the presentation over to you, that would be great. Thank
I'm
you.
good to go. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Everyone can see my slides, I'm hoping.
perfect.
Okay. It's always tricky because I have a lot of screens at my desk. So I'm like, which one are you all seeing? Okay. So thanks for having me. For those who I have not met, my name is Alicia Stewart. I'm the program coordinator with Brant Skill Center, and had, quite a hand on the workshops that we were offering through the DLEP funding that were really awesome in our community. So today I'm going to share in a fast way, because I know we're on a time limit, the best practices for serving learners and how we did that in our community. The 6 sort of areas I'm going to talk about, and again, there is overlap, I think, between what I'm saying, perhaps what Carolina went through, and what the other presenters will go through. So I will be brisk, but I can send my slides after if you want them to review anything that I've said or answer questions. So the 6 areas I will go through are behind the scenes, collaboration, learning environment, content and workshops that we delivered, schedule and format, and finally, learning culture. So we'll start with the behind the scenes stuff. So the reason I say behind the scenes is because we have a little bit of work to do before you can serve a learner, and looking at what is the need. So that starts with the need assessment and analysis. Community dependent. So we in Brant Skill Center, we know Brantford, Brant, and the surrounding areas very well. That's where we've been for quite some time. And we have a good understanding of our community, but that doesn't mean every project needs us to look at what is the community asking us for right now. And we'll analyze data from past projects as well to inform development and content creation for upcoming work. We then do, as needed, curriculum design and development. We know that lots of good curriculum exists out there already from the network, from different organizations across the province. But if we do need to develop anything or design new changes, that would be at this point. We would then look at any instructor training that was required, making sure all of our instructors, full-time, part-time, and volunteer, have the ability to do any development ahead of time and enhance their teaching ability and knowledge of the content. And then we would go into program evaluation and quality assurance. So looking at survey results and making sure we're delivering quality programming that is enjoyed by learners and needed. We would make sure that we're looking at statistics against our goals. So sometimes we're the applicant on a project. In this case, we were not. So regularly communicating with lovely people at LLSC, such as Jeremy, to say, hey, here's what we've got going on this quarter, what changes need to happen, and making sure we're hitting those goals so that we can keep getting the funding that is so needed. And these are catchy titles, right? But we love the little buzzwords, data-driven decision-making. So that's just very simply making decisions by way of the data. An example of this would be, what have we got going on for wait lists? Are a lot of people waiting for a certain topic? Well, let's dive into that and make sure we're offering more opportunities for people to join us for that training so that they don't get frustrated that they keep missing that one that they're dying to get into. Another one is marketing and promotion. At least us in community-based, have no budget for marketing or promotion, but we leverage the opportunities we have in our community for free promotion by way of the city websites, social media, local newspaper. We have Be Seen in Brantford that allows us to put the event guide in for free, things like that. And we also have a really healthy distribution list via email to make sure those who are looking for training, let me get you on that list so you always know what we're offering. We also need to manage our resources and technology. It's a technology-focused project after all. So we want to make sure everything is regularly updated, it's in good working order, and it's current for what's required in today's digital economy. We also want to continue to lean on our partnerships and collaborate with other organizations in the area. This is definitely community dependent, but here in Brantford, making sure, does the library know what we're doing? Do the community centers and hubs have our flyers up? Do the senior sites know about us? Just making sure that message gets as far as possible. And finally, staying updated on the best practices. So of course, I'm presenting about what we went through for this project, but also hearing from others that are providers within this network, knowing what everyone else is doing, what resources are you using? Because we firmly believe just because we've been doing it a certain way doesn't mean we shouldn't be making changes and adjustments as we go. On that note, collaboration. So it's incredibly important with this project or any to make sure we're partnering with our community. So that helps us to expand our reach. Who knows about our program? My least favorite thing is, I didn't know about you guys. I wish I knew sooner. You always want to make sure as many people know about it because it is free training and it is awesome. So I hate to think someone missed out because they didn't know. Again, I've touched on this, but sharing resources within the network and further to make sure we have up-to-date stuff. And partnering also allows us to increase accessibility. For example, getting in areas where there's harder to reach populations. If we travel and deliver programming there, that can remove the barrier of transportation. It could also mean that that location is comfortable and feels good to them. For example, the library is a safe place for lots of people to learn and feel comfortable. We love going there and meeting them where they're at. Partnering also helps enhance credibility. So if we say, hey, we are partnered up with the city to do some healthy aging workshops, and we're doing that with our digital literacy project, well, that sounds very fancy and cool. And it is, and it just allows people to really see us as a credible provider. And then finally, it allows us to provide holistic support. And by that, I mean that wraparound idea. So if someone is coming to us for a smartphone workshop, but they're actually having difficulty paying bills online and they're behind, they need to connect with somebody else, it allows us to open up and see what else we might be able to refer them to or support them with. I'm doing very touch on these. I'm going quickly through it, but I'm seeing kind of nods. You all get the idea. Okay. All right, so the learning environment. Some of this may seem like common sense, we know it, but there was a few things, as we started in the first year and continue to work in this project that were apparent that they were very important, more than we thought. So I thought we would add this. So we think it's important to consider, of course, comfort. That's physically, comfortable chair, all that, but also comfort with the technology. So allowing learners to understand you're not going to break or hurt anything. You are welcome to make mistakes. It's okay that you don't know how, and we're going to help you. The physical space should be comfortable, well lit. It should be accessible for mobility devices, service animals, etc. And there should be enough room that you can comfortably sit and kind of be in your space without bumping into anyone. It also should be quiet and all that stuff, easy to learn. Accessibility, I've touched on that as well. Comfortable furniture and equipment. So we make sure that all of our computers, for example, can pull towards you, move down, move up. The chairs can go up and down. You can move the mouse to the other side, whatever you like to make it most comfortable for you. And then finally, the instructors and facilitators. So this is the biggest one. we really believe that the instructor should have no assumptions about a person or their prior experience. For example, maybe someone ticks off on their survey that they have a bachelor's degree. Well, that they're educated, they should know computers. That's not necessarily true. Or somebody indicates that they're low income. Well, that must mean they've never used technology. Again, not true. So it's very easy to have preconceived notions about what we think a learner needs or has experienced, but allowing us to remove those, prejudices or whatever, allows us to be more open-minded to just what the learner is presenting as a need. We also are approachable, patient, understanding. Yes, let's try that again. Of course, we have time for your question, all of those types of things. And normalizing feelings of frustration or anxiety, especially with technology. If we're teaching a workshop about online banking and how to use it, it's okay if you are not ready to do that right now and you just want to learn about it. No one's forcing you, et cetera, et cetera. Technology can really be well, we've seen hundreds of stories, but especially with our senior learners, they're very apprehensive and nervous about either making a mistake or doing the wrong thing. And it's really important as facilitators to remove that nervousness as best we can. Next is getting to the point of content. So what are we delivering? It's important within that content to make sure we identify the learning outcomes. What are we going to work on today? Very clearly at the start of the workshop, or even perhaps in our advertisements and marketing. What are you going to be learning when you come in for these workshops? We begin with the basics and do chunked learning, where we bite off each piece slowly and build on it throughout the workshop. We also make the learning relevant and real world, which again sounds like common sense, but we want to make sure that what's being told in class is really something you would do. For example, if we're teaching about smartphones, pardon me, we want to show them not just, well, here's the App Store. We want to show them, okay, here's how you download an app and why might you want to do that? So really practical steps to using the technology. We use visual aids and multimedia. I love a good video clip in a workshop or graphics or screenshots to show exactly what you're trying to teach. Keeping everything engaging and interactive with hands-on activities, group work as appropriate, etc. And continuing to incorporate that accessibility. For example, making sure everything is written with an eye for clear writing, making sure fonts and font sizes are large enough to see even from the back of the classroom, making sure mice are large enough to get any size hand on, etc. So, on the note of content, on the screen, you'll see multiple different examples of workshops that we offered here at Brant Skills Center through the Digital Literacy Exchange Project. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are our most popular ones that were taken and offered repeatedly throughout the project. They will be sorely missed by our community. We did put out the March calendar as our final one, and people are already saying, when are we going to see April? And I hate that I have to say right now, there will not be in April, but stay tuned because you never know what's next. Yeah. So near the end, I want to talk a little bit about schedule and format and the best practices around that. So scheduling, we always make sure that we're as flexible as possible, offering multiple different time slots and days of the week for different workshops. The duration really does depend, but we do no longer than 3-hour workshops. The preference seems to be about the 2-hour mark within our center. And for ones that repeat, we never do them longer than 6 weeks, but typically it's only about 3 parts. So we would offer perhaps part 1 on the Tuesday, part 2 the following Tuesday, and part 3 after that, keeping the day and the time consistent. It's just what works for our community. And on that note, we love consistency. So we know if someone's taking part 1 of a workshop Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning, I'm not going to do part 2 Thursday at 5 at night, because typically if the morning worked for them, they would take part 2 and part 3 at the same time of day. We also know that learners need breaks and time off. So a 2-hour workshop or a 3-hour workshop will always have a little break, and it kind of just hits a natural point where we'll say, take a quick minute, go breathe some air, whatever. And we also know that time off between learning is important. So again, if we have part 1, part 2, we would give a few days or even up to a week between to allow them to practice their skills and build questions perhaps for the next time that they're in. And the format, at least I'll speak to Brant Skills Center format of delivery. We had some small group and one-to-one options, depending on the workshop type. Most commonly within our ones called Ask a Tech, where individuals got to book 30-minute time slots one-on-one to come in with their own device or item and ask questions. We also had some options for blended learning. That could look like a Zoom workshop where people are actually joining at a time, or we had options to go through modules on a learning platform where they would work with the instructor and participate with online learning. Less common than in person, but it was an option. Everything is broken into sort of module learning where, again, we're chunking off pieces on certain topics and then including things that are experiential, hands-on, real-time sort of things that practice those skills and enhance learning. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is learning culture. And Carolina had some nods to this already in her presentation that were awesome. So there will be some repetition, but some key things we consider is firstly offering support. Again, it sounds like common sense, but making sure the individual knows that they can ask questions. There is no judgment in not knowing the answer, and we're going to support them in their learning journey. Fostering a growth mindset. So encouraging learners to see challenges on their way to learning as opportunities to grow and to learn more and to find even more questions to ask. I mean, at our mandate is lifelong learning, and we continue to remind learners of that within the classroom. Celebrate success. So acknowledge, hey, you didn't know how to do that last time. Oh, look at you texting your grandchildren, etc. It's really fun to celebrate even the small wins, especially with technology. And we provide flexible learning. So making sure that it's a time of day that works for them, that they come in and it's not a large, intimidating classroom, these sort of things. Leveraging peer learning. So within our physical classroom, there are desks that sort of have 2 seats together. And this often happens without our even trying, that someone will end up sitting beside someone else and they're kind of helping each other or whispering little questions. We really encourage that and think it's a really great addition to in-person learning. Along with the celebrating success is building that confidence. Again, that constant reminder that you're not going to hurt anything. You are going to get more comfortable as you continue to practice. And finally, we offer choice and autonomy with learning. Working with adults, I mean, I've never worked with children learners, but I love working with adults because they are participants in their learning. They like to choose what they want to do and in what order they want to do it. So we can provide what we offer and then they kind of pick and choose and take what they want. And it's been really fun to see people either, I want to take that again, or I want to take something harder. And they're really hands-on when it came to their learning journey. It was a lot of fun to see throughout the project. And in the interest of time, I will just end there. Thank you all for listening to me talk. And Jeremy, if you want the slides after, I can certainly send them to you.
That would be great, Alicia. Thank you. And one thing I feel, since you were talking about being data-driven, one of the things I feel I have to say is that Alicia's data every quarter is always so neat and clean and easy to read, and I have always complimented her on that. And also, when people, it's wonderful. And when people have asked me, "Oh, how would you like your data presented?" I say, "Well," and I asked Alicia for permission to share her version. I would say, "Well, Alicia's created a nice template." So when you say data-driven, I know exactly what you are talking about. So thank you very much for the presentation. That was terrific.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So the next presentation we have is from Jan Gorley. As I mentioned at the beginning, Jan has a conflict, but she has recorded a video, which I have here. So I'm going to share the screen with her video, which I have in front of me. Yep, there we go. And if anybody, for whatever reason, has any issue with the audio, you can put up your hand and I will modify it. And I take it everyone's able to see the screen okay? Perfect. Okay. Actually, that's her slide deck. Yeah, now let's up. Here we go. Perfect.
Sorry, Jeremy. I can hear anything.
Are you not hearing anything? Okay.
No.
Yeah, I just saw that in the chat from John. Let me see what I can do and make some adjustments here to make sure that you can hear it. I'm going to try it again now. I have made it considerably louder, so if it's a little too loud, let me know, but I'm going to press play now and let me know if you can hear it. Still not hearing it?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I think you have to share audio separately from sharing the screen, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think you are
In
correct
Zoom.
about that. Yeah, let me sorry for that little snafu there. Let me go in there to make sure that I am getting both correct.
Jeremy,
Yes.
I like how you strategically built in an actual situation of digital literacy during the webinar. Well, excellent.
Well, hey, happy accidents. All right. Well, I have found that. Thank you for pointing that out because this illustrates a point that I often make when I'm working with learners all the time when I come in and I tell them, you're going to see me make all kinds of errors and things are going to go wrong here. So this is how we learn. All right. So I have adjusted the audio here. Hopefully, let me know right away if this does not work.
Manager with Literacy Link South Central
Are you able to
and
hear
a
it now?
registered early childhood educator by trade. I've had the opportunity in recent years to shift my focus to adult education, and I love it. I'm passionate about empowering learners and celebrating the opportunity to grow and learn with them. I live for those aha moments. I want to start by thanking Jeremy for holding this session and inviting me to join you today. I'm sorry that I couldn't attend live today, but I wanted to send this recording as I'd like to share with you the principles that I've applied to preventing and addressing learning challenges while facilitating digital literacy sessions. I feel it's important to note that I've mostly worked with seniors and learners living in supportive housing, but that these strategies can easily apply to all learners. My approach is mostly to concentrate on preventing learning challenges. By focusing on preventing learning challenges, I also feel better prepared to handle them if they do arise. So what do I mean by preventing learning challenges? Obviously, if someone is facing a challenge like a learning or cognitive disability, this is not something we can prevent. But there are ways to remove other barriers to learning and to provide an environment that is universally beneficial to everyone to minimize the impacts of existing challenges and to prevent creating new ones. There are also ways to make the space feel safe, which often leads to learners revealing a learning challenge or for you to detect that one might exist. I'm aware that my colleague Carolina has already spoken to you about accessibility, which is a big part of removing barriers. When it comes to preventing challenges, there are a few strategies I try to employ. Where possible, I make the learning environment as flexible as possible. For example, I don't set up laptops or workstations, but instead leave everything in piles for the learner to pick up and take to a spot that works for them. I explain to the learners how I'll be using the space and offer a variety of positions that they could sit in, and so that they can choose what works best for them. I also try to understand the business case for someone attending the program. So quite simply, what's in it for them? How is this learning going to help them, support them, address their needs, and affect outcomes that matter to them? Directly related to this is to understand their motivations and their learning goals. Why did they choose to come to this program? Did someone push them to be here or make them feel that they needed to be here? Or do they recognize in themselves a particular gap in their knowledge? And what are their expected outcomes? Do they want to better understand how to use their phone, for example? Or do they feel unsafe and at risk using their computer? What is the need they have? It's been my experience that time spent on day one learning about the participant, what types of devices they own, what types of devices they'd like to have, what they have difficulty with, and what they want to be able to do are the best way to address learning the answers to all of these questions and figuring out some basic information about a learner and their potential barriers. Also, coming into the program without an agenda of your own as a facilitator is incredibly helpful. Allowing the participants and their responses to your questions to create a launching point for learning. I'll often provide the group with a long list of possible topics, making it very clear that they're not the only options for what we can cover, and we'll ask them to indicate what they hope to learn. All of these strategies really help create an understanding that I'm here for them and their needs, creates group consensus around topics to be explored, leads to empathy and collaboration amongst learners, and creates an understanding for me of where we may experience hurdles or need to focus on additional skills before moving into more complex learning. I prioritize day one as an opportunity to explore and check in on basic skills. For example, can they turn on a device? Do they know a right click versus a left click? Do they know how to figure out whether they're connected to Wi-Fi? Do they know what an icon is or an app and how to open or close or resize software? Last, I prioritize my messaging to be, you may not know, but you just don't know yet. We all have the capacity to grow and learn new things, and the best way to do this is to play and experiment and expose yourself. So we do a lot of experimentation, and rather than me answering questions, I say things like, what do you think? Or how do you think you could find that answer? Or let's try it and see what happens. This gives everyone permission not to know, to leave behind judgment and self-doubt, and to learn and grow together. As I've mentioned, it's been my experience that learners appreciate an environment where they have more autonomy, feel that you're there for them, and feel supported, not judged. I've had learners demonstrate their positive feelings to me about the digital learning sessions through the comments that I've shared on the screen. Things like, that's great. I'm going to sit right here at the very end, even though it's not really a spot, because my neck gets really sore if I have to look sideways. Or I like that we leave the last 30 minutes for questions and one-on-one support time because I can't focus for that long. And I've also heard, you've made it really clear you're here for us. So I just want to let you know I have a learning challenge and I feel like I can't keep up. I need additional support from you, but I don't want to be singled out. Although these are just a few examples of what I've personally experienced as a facilitator, you can hopefully see that learners with a broad variety of needs and barriers can thrive and feel supported by applying these strategies. I also try to be very aware of how I'm providing instruction as a means to preventing learning challenges. So I focus on being a cheerleader and really celebrating new learning successes and remembering and applying knowledge from previous weeks. I also try to make the connection for learners around how they can apply what they've learned on one device to many devices or applications. So for example, I'll show them that if you know what the settings icon looks like on your phone, and you know why you'd want to go into settings, what that allows you to do, then you also know how to access the settings on your computer or your tablet. They all use that same icon that looks like a cogwheel. I also purposely address stereotypes and biases when providing instruction as a way to lift the learners up. So, for example, I'll reference back to a learner telling me that their kids or grandkids just do everything for them. And I'll say something like, you told me they do everything because they think you should already know how to do it, and they don't want to take the time to show you. And you mentioned it bothers you. So this is a great reason why we should play and experiment and learn together how to search for the answers and how to find them on your own. This way you won't have to hear those things from your family and from the people that you've mentioned. Last, I employ a variety of instruction methods, including watch me and then do it yourself. Try to find the answer yourself, and then let's come together as a group to discuss the various answers we found. Group and partner work. And also group thinking. So that's where I don't provide the answer. I throw it back to the group to see if they can come up with the answer or if one of them knows the answer. I particularly love this strategy because it helps learners understand that they can turn to their peers for help when I'm not available after the session ends. Even with all this good prevention work, learning challenges will still arise. When they do, I try to think about the root cause. So if a learner is constantly interrupting and pulling support away from others, why is this happening? I find this often involves examining the learner's motivations and needs and using this knowledge to figure out some next steps. So for example, do you need to have a private conversation with them, or maybe just always check in with them first before circulating to the rest of the room, to the rest of the learners, or maybe even buddy them up with another learner. An example of this happened at a session that Jeremy and I attended, where there was a learner who was constantly pulling focus and wanting all of the attention to be on him. And I simply stepped over to this gentleman and asked him, what is it that you want to do? What are you trying to do? And he said, I want to play games on my phone. I've heard that you can get all kinds of games and I want to play games, but I can't afford to pay for them. And that was an aha moment, because I realized that a lot of the conversations that Jeremy and I were having with learners wasn't meeting his needs, and it wasn't addressing the current barrier that he was experiencing. We were talking about, things like Microsoft Office and checking email, and that's not where he was at. So instead, I spent a few minutes showing him how to access the App Store on his phone, and showing him that when he searched for things, there were options that were free and options that were paid for. And that completely changed the dynamic of the session. He downloaded a couple of games, found one that he was super excited about, and started playing it immediately while the session was happening. And although that meant that he wasn't focused on some of the other learning that was going on, it did meet his needs. And he would call out every once in a while to say, I just got to level 4, or I just got to level 10. And then it became a simple matter of encouraging him to keep going and letting him know that I was excited for him, that he had found what he wanted in that device. So it really allowed us to move forward as a group with other learning while not leaving him behind or excluding him, and making him feel that his needs were met. Sometimes, like with the above learner I mentioned, you just quickly need to teach a quick win, or you need to get out of a really challenging spot in the learning and or boost confidence for the learner. Adding support without singling a learner out is a big one. So, for example, in my most recent session, I had a lady approach me to say that she did have a learning challenge and that she didn't want to be singled out, but she needed more support. I was able to talk with her about that and suggest that maybe what she could do is continue to sit right beside me as I was teaching, and I would make it a priority to always check in with her when I circulated the room. So every time I stood up and I checked to see how everybody was doing and if they were following along, I would always check with her first. And I often found that she was struggling to figure out where we were at, or to know where to put her mouse or what menu we were in. And so that gave me the opportunity to quickly walk back through the steps with her, make sure that she felt confident, and then move on to the other learners in the room. And what was great about this is it did give those who were doing really well an opportunity to help their peers and demonstrate their learning and prepare any questions that they had for me. So it was a win for everybody without ostracizing or singling out that person who just needed a little additional support. And that concludes what I have to share with you today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you found that beneficial and enlightening, and you learned a few things from what I've learned in my time with digital literacy. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Glad that Jan was able to provide her story in her own words. We had a very productive conversation this morning, and when we were discussing what would be the most effective way for her to present, I really felt that you getting a chance to hear her in her own words was the most effective manner, and I definitely feel that the video is very indicative of that. All right, so without further ado, Anita, I am going to turn it over to you. I do have the video that you have provided, and would you like me to play that first, or would you like to provide a bit of an introduction before I play it?
I'll provide a little bit of an introduction.
Okay.
Okay. I'm Anita Hillis-Krause. I'm the Executive Director of the Haldeman Norfolk London Learning Centres, and we began with the DLEP program, signed our first MOU February 21st, 2019. And right from the initial presentation of the programming, we had seniors, which honestly kind of surprised me. We had a drop-in situation rather than a workshop, because that's how we work individual learning plans. Of course, we're community-based literacy. And so that was something we were familiar with. And we just told people to come in and tell us what you need. So that's exactly what they did. And sometimes it was as simple as, how can I use my phone better? I've done this on my computer and I can't figure out how to fix it. And sometimes we couldn't fix it. So we were just basically staying a step ahead of the people that we were providing support to a lot of the time. And as things moved along, we had, I have to tell you about some of my individual seniors. So Muriel, who is now the poster person for this program, the funder has used her photo in some of the marketing materials. Muriel came to us in her late 70s and came in the door and said, I want to get my grade 12. And so we explained to her that we didn't do credit programming, etc. And she said, no, I know that, but I just need to brush up on some things so then I can go get my grade 12. So that's what we did with her. And it became apparent quite quickly that her need for additional digital help was quite important. So what we did is she came as a regular drop-in to our digital program. And then she brought some of her senior lady friends. And that started a whole new culture in our DLEP programming. So then they asked if we'd take it if we could come to the local retirement home, assisted living home. So we went there, and for the most part, that was reasonably well received. But then after the novelty wore off, no one came other than our regular folks. So they wanted to come out. They wanted a time out of the facility, so they came to us. One of the things that we found that was a common theme throughout the entire time we've presented this with everyone, not just our seniors, is this deep-seated fear of technology and feeling very overwhelmed. Also being very afraid because all you hear about are scams and all of those things. And how can I discern whether this is good or bad, or is this real information, etc. So then we, before the pandemic hit, Muriel did achieve her grade 12. And with her additional digital help, one day she came to us. She had been learning how to search safely online. And in searching safely online, she found herself a rideshare program because she'd always wanted to drive across the country and can't drive. So we were in an absolute panic, needless to say, thinking, oh my gosh, this woman's nearly 80 years old and she wants to go across the country with a stranger. So we said to her, well, you really need to check something. She said, oh no, I've already checked. They've had a police records check. She checked with the police to see if it was legitimate. She did all of the things we taught her to. She employed all of those skills and had found a safe way to travel the country at a nominal cost to her and to fulfill yet another dream. So we learned from Muriel almost as much as she has learned from us. That being said, she has come back to us as a tutor. But then COVID hit, and this little core group of senior ladies soon began sharing what they had learned with others as far as being able to use video chatting services, being able to assist others in connecting with us through video chat so we could help them schedule doctor's appointments virtually, to access their health information, to help them to access their families, etc. And so we were just pivoting, like I always say, we were like the whirling dervishes, because no day was ever without some sort of creative way to problem solve. So anyway, then so these ladies are still participating and still learning. They have requested things. We heard about this. We would like to learn about that. So now, Jeremy, if you could play the video. These ladies wanted to learn a few different things. So that we've interviewed them, and this is their video and what they learned about TikTok rather.
All right, I will hit play.
It might be mute. I'm talking to another learner here, and when this learner came to our classes, felt that technology was their
enemy.
So how do you feel about that now?
They're not so bad.
Not so bad.
They're quite friendly, actually, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to learn to know what I'm doing.
And
so it's not the computer's fault.
That's a good point, right? Because sometimes we think that it's out to get us.
Yep.
And it's not really. They can be frustrating, of course, technology. Did it help you feel more?
Yeah, I go into the computer more than what I used to.
So you feel more confident to use it when you need it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually just at the beginning of class today, you were the first one that opened up your laptop and started looking up. What were you looking up?
I was looking up election stuff.
And you were helping people get...
You had to find out where they voted.
Where they need to go to vote?
Yeah.
So that was really good. Thank you very much.
During the pandemic, some of the hospitals, they would have a great big sign, and on that sign, it would have a QR code. You figure out how to use them. They are so helpful. So you scan the code, and then a website comes up. You go to that website, and in case of the hospital, you were checking in. You were doing a virtual check-in. So now I'm asking if I'm sending information out, because I do other volunteer work, if there's a quiz or something, I ask people, can you make a QR code? Because then we can teach other people how to use them with their phones.
And do you know how to make a QR code?
You taught me, but I forget. I need to
So
learn
we'll
again.
have to review that one?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I have another learner here, and they actually came in with a fair level of, you had digital skills coming in. You weren't a pure beginner, but there was some projects that you were able to complete, and they were...
It was a calendar for last year, and now I'm working on one for this year.
Right, and it's like a wall calendar?
Yes, and then there's going to be an 18-month calendar.
Oh, that's a good idea. And what do you use for photographs on that?
On my own photography.
Oh, that's very cool. That's professionally printed.
Yeah.
Way to go. Well done. I know this about you, that you've been using those skills in your volunteer work in the community, which has been very valuable to all of us. But then you also said that you are now sometimes able to help family and friends.
Right. And it's true, because the Canva things that I would have never thought I could do, thanks to your help, I've been able to. And even with the regular computer aspect, I know I've helped a few people in here, and I had somebody yesterday ask me about something, and I was actually able to help them with it.
So as we were talking today about digital skills that people have learned, one of our learners came up with something else that she says she's learned from being in the group specifically.
When I first started, I was having trouble expressing myself, but since I've been here, I feel a lot better at being able to speak out and express myself.
That's awesome. So those are my cyber seniors, they call themselves, and they do a newsletter for us now regularly. But but as you can see, they are inspiring. So we started in Haldeman, and then we moved on just recently to provide the same sort of services in Norfolk, and then just very, very recently in London. Very different needs, very different levels of experience and knowledge, but needs nonetheless. One of the things I forgot to mention during COVID, the seniors decided, which we adopted for all of our learners, a partnering. So checking in once a week, two people that have agreed to check in once a week with one another, just to make sure that folks with any mental health challenges or loneliness or isolation were at least had something to look forward to in their week, and also had someone who, because we couldn't possibly do it all. And we did have one situation where a person with an extraordinary mental health need, we were able to send help, and they were hospitalized for a time. So what we learned, what our learners learned with this program, was so far beyond what we could have ever anticipated. But getting back to Norfolk, we have been presenting to the senior support group. They have a luncheon every month, actually right at the Legion where we are located. And so we had a first sort of general information session, which was supposed to be 20 minutes. Went all through lunch, went way past lunch, and all these different people came and asked questions and got a little bit of help. And then very specifically, we were asked to go back and talk about cybersecurity, AI, and those kinds of things. Out of that, we've had some folks that have dropped in, but we have one gentleman in particular who came to us, and I will read his request verbatim. He came in and asked, this was in early October, and said, could we make him better on the computer? And so since then, we've been working diligently with him. He's still attending once a week, Wednesday afternoons. And so he now emails profusely, does online shopping. I'm not sure if we should have taught him that, maybe. Likes to talk with his family over the phone using WhatsApp, has other apps that he has installed and uses very frequently, and is just now so eager to learn more. And then in Delhi, we have a lady who heard about us through senior support and desperately wanted to come, but has very severe mobility issues. So what she wanted is some advice about buying an iPad. So my coordinator, who provides the instruction in Norfolk, made an appointment with her and went to her home, and we put all kinds of safety and security things in place. This woman can't move enough to do anything harmful, but we're always very careful. But we also wanted to provide something, if we possibly could, for her. So after all was said and done, she has, and I've got to get a senior-friendly phone, and had really only used it for a telephone. Well, now she uses it to make calls, emails, sends texts, and now knows how to enter and save her contacts. Jessica, our instructor, also helped her to set up the internet on her old desktop computer, set up her email there, and bookmarked her favorite websites, and showed her how to do all of those things. And after all that was said and done, this woman realized she really doesn't need an iPad. She has this smartphone and she has a desktop computer, so her needs are all met. So we saved her a lot of money, and she is a big fan now. Then just more recently, we started with London, and it's poor Lisa. She's our new instructor, just started in September, and we've just overloaded her with so many things, and she just takes it all in. But one gentleman in particular, the fellow who wants us to make him better at the computer, he's the one that really inspired her to continue, and really sort of dissipated any stress or frustration she felt about delivering it. So I think in closing, I would say I see the enormous benefit from a security point of view, scams, et cetera. We are helping our people to be more discerning, how to find really good and reliable information, et cetera. But more than anything, I'm seeing their social skills are improving. They're not as lonely. We're seeing an improvement in mental health. One of the ladies in the TikTok video, I will not point her out in particular, has suffered from severe depression and had pretty much become completely housebound. And due to the DLEP program, has something to come out of the house for. And that is enormous, in my opinion. If we don't do one other thing, but are able to help one person in that way, I think that's remarkable. And I'll tell you, the commitment these folks have shown in Dunnville in particular, where everybody's coming from a distance, where internet is unreliable or non-existent. We had folks during the pandemic that would bundle up and come on their motorized scooters and sit outside our center so they could access our internet. And that shows me, and I hope others, how very, very critical this kind of programming and these skills are, especially to our seniors who are more vulnerable. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed our video. They had a ball making it for you, and the learners did it. They did the editing and everything else, and I would say the average median age is probably about 79 in that group. So I'm really, really proud of them. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Anita. All right, so I'm shuffling our presenter deck a little bit. I'm going to have Nalita and John from Fanshawe St. Thomas go next. So I turn it over to the two of you.
Hey, Jeremy, thank you for that. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. And I appreciate the other presenters who are now coming after me. So I'm going to try to navigate that as well. We were asked to talk about kind of how to expand a program and grow demand for digital skills training. And I really like the phrasing of that, grow the demand. And I'll circle back to that. And that's kind of providing me with a bit of a theme. As we go through, growth in demand is based on early in the conversation we were talking about, and Jeremy, you were talking really eloquently about the incredible need for this kind of service in the community. DLEP has been in the game for 7 years, and the need has not gone away. If anything, it's grown among older people, among marginalized communities, among a variety of different groups. There's a huge need, but need and demand are not the same thing. When we look at, sorry, I'm skipping through the slides. When we think about the need, you know, a good metaphor that I can think of is if somebody comes to me and says, my friend James needs digital literacy. My friend James needs to learn this. He's struggling. That's a need. That's a legitimate need, but it's not a demand because James is not part of the conversation. The demand comes when James, first of all, becomes aware that James has a need, and becomes aware that there's a need that there's a resource that he can use that would satisfy that need. So from a strategic perspective as service providers, that's something, that's a process that we need to pay very close attention to and really lean into. So the things that I want to talk about are how to, as a service provider, as a leadership team, as staff, as practitioners, and as members of communities, how do we pay attention? How do we listen actively to understand what the needs are in our communities, in the communities that we serve? And having understood those needs when someone is talking, if policymakers or funders or different levels of government are talking about struggles that they're having or that they're seeing in their stakeholders, that's an expression of need. But how do we get from there to a demand, to a plan, to to a service, to an intervention. So that expression of need, we need to be present to hear that expression of need. So we need to be present in as many networks as possible. We need to be out there in communities. We need to be listening and talking to service providers, to other service providers. We need to be talking to business communities. We need to be listening to policymakers, to funders, to all levels of government. We need to be listening hard, and we need to be actively listening so that we're working to understand those needs. We need to be aware of who we are as service providers. We need to understand who we are. We need to understand our scope of practice and understand the tools that are in our toolbox that can meet those needs. If somebody comes to me and says X or Y or Z has a need, I need to be willing, ready, and able to say, wait a minute, that sounds like a need that I am interested in, that I can meet, that I might be able to do something about. And it may not be a direct translation, and I'll get to that in a moment. It may not be, someone's talking about a need for digital literacy. Here we go. That's not how it comes through. That's not how the initial communication happens. When we hear that need, we need to be able to reach out and we need to be heard, which means that we need to have a reputation with that stakeholder, with that expression of need, or with that person who actually has the need. And that's where we start to translate that need into a demand, where the person who actually has the need connects the dots to our ability to meet that need as a service provider. And that's incredibly important in this. As we open up that communication, we understand the need, we engage that person or that group with the need in a conversation, and together we grow an understanding of what the need is. We do a needs assessment, essentially. And as a result of that, that's where we can get into, and I think speaking to this room, there's a fairly, you guys all know the stuff. It's all kind of true, right? And I'm seeing lots of nods and things like that. The pathway from there to a needs assessment, to a program plan, to a memorandum of understanding, and to actually acting to meet that need is fairly clear to us. It's those early stages that I think are incredibly important for us, because they have to do with our own internal culture as an organization. They have to do with our own leadership culture, our willingness and our readiness to hear needs that are being expressed, to understand that we have the capacity to meet those needs, and our reputation in those networks to reach out and be heard and to get a response. It also talks about the importance of measuring what's important. In growing and growing our programs, when we measure, and I love, Jeremy, you talked about Tamara's expression that meeting a target is boring. And I'm going to write that down on a prominent place in my wall. Exceeding targets is way, way fun. And that happens when you measure and you celebrate progress towards targets, and you celebrate changes that increase our ability to meet and exceed our targets. So there's that internal culture of celebration, of being hungry for that kind of growth and the ability, and taking great satisfaction in meeting those demands and connecting with community. Jeremy, I've shared the slide deck with you, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just leave it with you to share that, if that's okay. But what I'll point to here in this conversation, just really quickly, is kind of an example of how that came about for us in the context of the digital literacy enterprise program. That in this past year, Mennonite Community Services, we and Mennonite Community Services have existed in close partnership for a large number of years. They know us, they know that they know who we are, and they know, roughly speaking, that we do things in the literacy space, we do things in the education space. they don't necessarily know or care that we have this digital literacy program. I know that they actually do because they're really smart and they pay attention to what their partners are doing. But I got a call from Mennonite Community Services a little bit more than a year ago, an expression of need. And they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know, but they had a need for help with the family education support program of Aylmer that one of those partners had withdrawn, and that had created a crisis for them, a need. And they were just kind of reaching out to the network and asking if there were people who could help. That's it. And fortunately, the word came to me about that. They called me, and I said, "Wait a minute, let me step back because I think this is something that I'd really like to be involved in." And as a result, we became a partner in the FESPA program. In the first year, we used a different funding source to participate in that. But over the course of the first year, we realized that the FESPA program, especially the adult portion of the FESPA program, there are incredibly important digital literacy components of that. The Low German speaking Mennonite community needs digital literacy skills. The moms in particular need the ability to navigate digital spaces for the health of their family, to access healthcare, to access educational supports and schooling, to do things like ordering goods for the household, for groceries and things like that, to make good use of their smartphones. And just you guys can add to the list as much as you want. But the FESPA program is clearly a digital literacy program. So we were able to use the DLEP program resources to allow us to participate in the FESPA program. So it met a variety of needs, including digital literacy, allowed us to be a partner, and allowed us the excitement of being able to meet that need and exceed our targets. And that's my story. That's my sermon. Thus saith the whatever.
Thank you, John. That's terrific, and I appreciate the way too that you that you've embraced the excitement that comes from exceeding targets, because I think that one of the things that has been really clear from our partners is that there is this feeling that exceeding targets is not a matter of bragging rights. It's a matter of we did good, right? We went out and we really were able to understand what the needs of the community were, and as you, I think, very eloquently put it, people were able to distinguish between somebody identifying a need versus somebody being able to articulate that they have that need. And I think that distinction is such an important one. So I'm particularly grateful that you highlighted that. And I think that that's a really terrific segue, actually, for Courtney, who's going to be our next presenter from the YWCA, your neighbor in St. Thomas. So, Courtney, it's all yours.
All right. I'm just sharing my screen. Can everyone see that? Can anyone see the screen? If I could get a nod.
We can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Works.
Thanks, Courtney.
Perfect. So I'm also mindful of time. I'm feeling somewhat sheepish in the sense that so many of you are looking at this very top down in terms of your expertise, in terms of how long you've been working with the program and your breadth of experience. Hopefully I can provide, I am a fairly low level instructor in my role, and hopefully this provides somewhat of a case study of using the existing materials to meet local needs, and sort of thinking about how to make things accessible and having some positive experience with really particular groups of learners with really specific needs. So to that end, a little bit of background on myself. Like I said, I'm fairly new to the adult education space, and I'm fairly new to this program. I only started working in September of last year. So if something seems if it seems like I've missed something, let me know because I might have. I'll talk a little bit about what my students look like, what their needs were identified as, what their goals were, and some of the challenges that came with the digital literacy content that's available, and that might be used from someone who's using it as a jumping off point or a base point. I'm part of the YWCA Literacy and Basic Skills program more generally as part of our skills training and upgrading program. We work with adult learners. We have a classroom in St. Thomas and in Elmer. I work out of that Elmer classroom. We have a couple full-time instructors, and I'm going to be speaking mostly to my own experience working in Elmer. We had lots of learners in this area and from the surrounding area. Some of the characteristics of learners, we had a lot of members from the low German speaking community. This is certainly with respect to our friends from Fanshawe, you know, there's certainly a need for digital literacy in the low German speaking community, but connecting that to people actually getting into our workshops or understanding, appreciating that need and getting them as people in seats and ready to go, there can be a really big disconnect there. And I think some fairly obvious challenges as well. We had lots of adult learners that were 50 plus who are looking to upgrade their computer skills, often with an employment sort of focus, either growing their skills in their employment space or looking into new areas of employment, and lots of seniors as well. And some of the stories I heard about seniors, I wanted to jump up and tell a bunch of my sweet stories as well, as really wonderful, wonderful experiences. So just quickly, again, there's that employment focus, there's security and confidence, greater independence. There is that huge divide between, you know, I used to be able to figure out my EI by going into an office, and I used to be very confident there. All of a sudden, something I could do is now something I can only do with the computer. There's a level of frustration there. And there's a huge need for digital literacy in terms of the education space. And while we have lots of older learners, particularly low German community members who are looking to upgrade their education, Elmer is a fairly out of the way spot. Educational opportunities are often computer based, either through online courses, the replacement for the GED, taking that test, the Canadian Adult Education Credential, you have to take that test using a computer unless you have a learning disability. So many reasons to emphasize the needs for computer literacy in this community. The topics had a great variety as they exist right now. They were well suited for drop-in instruction. The focus on safety was really appreciated. Some of them ended up being quite short, practically speaking. So I often, as others have mentioned, group them into sort of larger, longer sessions. And I also found that 2-hour mark was a good sweet spot in terms of people feeling like they sort of got their value for, especially if they commuted in. And the content showed a lot of technical knowledge and expertise. And so what I'm going to focus on now quickly are just some of the challenges, limitations, and considerations for if you're working with what was my group of learners, practically speaking, were fairly low level. So in terms of their actual computer skills. So I would say to those looking to adapt these modules for LBS programming overall, individual topics are great for incorporating into existing student plans and new student plans. I appreciate the links to webinars and practice materials. Instructors should plan on creating or incorporating more hands-on learning activities. What we got a lot of feedback on was that students wanted to watch me do it. They wanted to maybe then watch a review video on how to do it. They wanted to have a picture of that in their workbook, and then they wanted to do it 2 or 3 times before they left. So in terms of actually walking away and feeling confident with the skills, some time to what I always discussed as, time to fiddle and tinker with it, was always well appreciated by learners. Many learners were referred to our program through employment services. And certainly if we were ever looking to expand this, working on expanding things that you might see in the employment space. And I saw that the Brant Learning Center did an excellent job of sort of expanding topics into things that might be useful and helpful for those with a particular employment focus. Anyone involved or who's looked into the area of adult learning specifically, there's always that emphasis on, why am I taking the time to learn this? Why is this important? What's the practical outcome for me? And so in terms of meeting that, being able to meet that sort of employment focus is important, especially for those who weren't seniors who are looking to improve their computer skills. In terms of the digital materials, if anyone's working with low-level learners, I would seriously encourage them to think about moving beyond using just the digital document. So while the digital documents are wonderful, and while I am truly a fan of trees, I found that for the seniors I was working with, you would almost need a session for them to be comfortable using that digital document before you were able to start with those materials. I often provided a paper document that they could make notes on, that they could take home. Many didn't know how to find a document if I had emailed it to them. They didn't know how to follow a link if it had one. They didn't know how to open or scroll. Didn't have Adobe or any sort of PDF program on their computer, didn't know how to do that, didn't know how to identify hyperlinks. So depending on your level of learner, those physical materials might be something to think about. The online survey was similarly difficult. A QR code is helpful for those that have any idea of how to use a QR code or what a QR code is. I remember one learner specifically, she said, I won't even go to a restaurant if I see one of those. She'll avoid the whole restaurant altogether. So the other thing that I would really emphasize and that I spent a lot of time working on were creating visuals. I used this guide quite a bit in terms of, where is the start menu? What am I talking about when I say that you're going to put your universal resource locator into the top of the web page, just using this and highlighting where on the screen you're going to find it. I made PowerPoint presentations. I added visual content to most of the existing modules in terms of those physical handouts, those workbooks, which were then provided digitally afterwards so that students could follow links if they wanted to. And I showed people how to do things multiple times and sometimes in different formats. So there's there's a lot of frustration that comes with, I'll show you how to favorite something or favorite a web page on Chrome, but then I go home and I'm using Microsoft and I'm using Explorer and it's not quite the same and now it's broken. I got that a lot. So I would often show it using 2 different web browsers and just emphasize that, similar to the analogy I used far too often, was if you get into a car that you've never been in before, you can be pretty sure there's a radio, but I bet that you're going to work the radio differently depending on what car you're in. So regardless of how you're approaching the computer, it's about figuring, you can be pretty sure that something like this is going to be there. And then where you get comfortable is learning how to tinker and being confident and looking for it. So this is one of the things that I found really helpful. This is my instructor Gmail account. So I don't give this Gmail address out to anyone. I only use it for instructional purposes. So this allows me to send myself a Zoom link and have them watch me sign on to a Zoom meeting. After opening it in an email, I can show them, as you can see, I have my spam example of how would you mark that as spam? How would you, after we go through identifying it, where's promotions, where's social, where do I look to see sent things? Where are my examples of these 3 dots? Those sorts of things. It was really helpful to have that, these sort of practical, watch me do it, and then take some time to sort of work through it on your own. Another thing that I would emphasize is that some of the modules were a lot longer and more complex than others. And as I noted before, some of them indicated a level of technical know-how that I myself couldn't boast. But for some of our learners, if we were still focusing on what's the difference between the left click and the right click, how do you move your cursor around the screen, getting into several levels of computer history or green computing, while obviously important, it was often an overload for our students, depending on their levels. So I would be very careful, and perhaps some of those modules, it'd be worth thinking about having a sort of beginner tier and a more advanced learner tier in terms of avoiding that, in terms of avoiding modules that have a lot of text, fairly high level language, and can lead to that information overload. So as I said, if you had too much information, and I am anxious to try not to spend too much of your time, if the language was too complex, that could be difficult for our learners. Too much information could leave them confused about key concepts and those practical learning goals that they came in with. And again, with adult learners, there was always that focus on the practical. With respect to individual instruction, this was often what, especially seniors, came in with. They want they want to know how to do a very specific thing, or they want that one-on-one work with someone. What I found was useful was to use individual instruction as something that was added on to sort of a broader classroom learning situation. I found that if we advertised sort of one-to-one book your half hour, participants often had unrealistic expectations of, I've got this particular tablet and I'd like you to help me with a very particular thing on it. And then some frustration if we weren't able to do that right that moment. And then there were also issues with scope. You'd have someone sign up for a 20-minute appointment and ask them to teach you about computers, full stop. So I found that creating a welcoming group setting allowed me to sort of work with learners. And if there were those really particular things that they wanted, we could sort of set a one-to-one appointment at that point after they had gone through sort of email basics. And then we could set a one-to-one session where we worked with their particular email provider. And so I found that when we used that for our one-to-one instruction, it meant the learners had realistic expectations about my level of expertise. I could ensure that I was well informed as an instructor. YouTube is always now my algorithms, because I'm looking for basic computer things all the time, keeps giving me advertisements for assisted living homes. So that speaks to our learner demographics. But most of all, I found with those one-to-one sessions, we had really, really meaningful learner interactions, and they really felt like their needs were being met, while that group format provided that safe sort of community and positive environment that so many of you have already stressed. So I won't go on. My last little piece was that I could provide dozens of examples of learners who really appreciated the program, appreciated the time that was taken, the wonderful sort of ripple effect impacts that these had in people's lives and in our communities. And while in my particular area, it's hard to get at the learners we're most anxious to serve, it was a really, really worthwhile program. And I just echo the thoughts of so many others that it's something that really should continue. I know we're pressed for time, but if anyone has any questions or anything like that, they're welcome to reach out to me directly. And thank you so much for taking some time to hear my little piece of what this looked like in my particular neck of the woods. Very appreciated.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And right back at you, much appreciated. And I really value the perspective that you bring to it as an instructor. So thank you. And I feel like with the final presentation, which is mine about working with newcomers, you've actually done a lot of my work for me, which I am also grateful for because I am mindful of time. But I also don't think there's anything I could say more eloquently than you have about the challenges that are involved in working with learners and really trying to meet them where they are. So with that in mind, I will share my screen with my presentation, and I am going to just talk very briefly about what it was like to work with newcomers. And what I will say is that I feel like my colleagues have really captured what it means to go and meet with people and to try to get a sense of who they are, where they are, and what they are looking for. I had the good fortune of working with newcomers as well, and the specific challenges that come with people who are, as I will speak to in a minute, highly educated and highly professional in many cases, but are nevertheless looking for basic digital skills. It's a really interesting dichotomy. All right, so of the newcomers that I have known, a great many were highly educated professionals who could not pursue their profession in Canada. And as a result, they were highly motivated, not only to continue their education, but to create a new career and a better life for their families. They had extensive digital skills experience in their home countries in many cases, but nevertheless, we're very humble in saying, I want to know the basics about how this works in English. I want to learn the basics about email communication, for example, in my new language. And I found that I was giving basic instructions to people who had software engineering degrees. It was really quite remarkable. And I would say to people, if I am saying something that you know is wrong, just stop me and tell me. I am open to learning from you. And I found this not only with people who were software engineers. I worked with many different engineers, lawyers, bankers, professors, doctors. I mean, it was really a fascinating group of people, all of whom really were coming from the point of view of we are here not only to have a better understanding about digital skills in Canada, but it was an opportunity to learn more about Canadian culture as well, in terms of conversation, in terms of what it's like in the business world, and really developing a clearer idea of how to navigate this, for many people, still mysterious society that they have joined. And I found that to be endlessly rewarding for many, many reasons, which I could talk on about at a different date. But what I will say, generalizing, of course, is that people were employment focused and they were looking for a documentation for Canadian experience, or a documentation of Canadian experience. So one of the things that Fanshawe College London did was provided specific certificates. And on those certificates, you had the Fanshawe logo as well as the Digital Literacy Exchange Project Community Tech Connect 2.0 logo, as a way of being able to provide them with a document showing that they had completed. In this case, it was workshops. These were 16-hour-long workshops that I facilitated. That way, people could take those certificates and add them to a resume, show them to a potential employer, show them to a potential organization for whom they wanted to volunteer. And I can tell you that there was a great deal of enthusiasm about receiving those certificates. In fact, I would tell people on the last day, we will get those certificates to you as soon as possible. And within days, I'd be getting an email saying, can you give me an idea of when I can expect those certificates? So it was really very wonderful. And people, again, were very grateful that there could be this form of documentation of the learning that they had completed. And so again, connected to that, people were often very interested in engaging with the skilled trades and how digital literacy connected both with the skilled trades and apprenticeship, because they were looking for careers that they felt would be gainful, provide gainful employment where there would be long-term stability. They were often coming to me for referrals and advice regarding different forms, different types of programs, often at the college level. What could I tell them or to whom could I refer them to, because they had specific questions they wanted to ask about what types of programs they should take at Fanshawe, or if they were interested in going back to university, what were the steps involved? And what I found directly connected to that was very quickly word traveled within different newcomer communities about, okay, here's a guy, in this case, Jeremy, that I can talk to about some very specific things regarding my education, or he could potentially offer me some suggestions about where to get a digital skills training. And so I learned very quickly that really this was, as I think all of my predecessor presenters have said, we became a hub of community for people. We became a place where really good and helpful conversations could happen about finding other people, in this case within the City of London, who could point people in directions where opportunities were taking shape. Again, not only in terms of education and employment, but also for volunteering. And inevitably, not only was there a gratitude for connection, there was a strong desire to continue that training. And so what I will say briefly about barriers is that in some cases, English was a barrier, but often people, were able to speak quite fluently. But the main barriers were getting Canadian experience and also having access to technology beyond their phones. This has really been the most consistent barrier because of the costs that are involved, not only in terms of accessing internet, but also being able to have access to hardware. So what I will say, just on top of that, is that we very much recognize, and I get this from the participants with whom I've worked, that there is a need to continue this, because really DLEP is not just about providing people with opportunities to develop their skills. It is also about giving people an opportunity to network for education, for employment with their communities. I mean, we really have become, in many ways, a one-stop shop for a range of community services. And that is certainly something that I intend to put into my final report. And again, I feel that my colleagues here have made very clear the breadth as well as the depth of that demand. And so I really think that as far as newcomers are concerned, this is often dramatized in a very poignant way, because these are individuals who have come at great cost and are really interested in investing themselves in the Canadian project. And they want to know, how do we do that? And I feel like digital really is a gateway to a wide range of things. Several people have mentioned voting, civics, accessing different forms of governmental services, being able to connect with other people who, within your community, whether it's your faith community, your neighborhood community. And digital, as all of us know, has become the main currency of networking and communicating with others. And I feel like that's one of the greatest learnings and takeaways that I have. And I'm just going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to leave it at that. What I will say, as far as the remainder of our webinar, I know that at the beginning I had put out the opportunity for a question period. What I am thinking might be more constructive is that if you have questions that you would like to pose to some of our other presenters, I'd actually be interested in posting a Q&A document along with the webinar where we can have specific questions asked and answered, and provide that as a resource to the community if everybody is comfortable with that. Obviously, the Q&A can be anonymous if you prefer, but I think that having a document like that would be valuable as a resource to the broader community. Now, having said that, if you do have questions for Courtney, I know you made yourself available. I certainly don't want to deprive you of an opportunity to answer questions, but does anybody have something they would specifically like to ask Courtney at the moment? And if it's something that you think of later as well, we can definitely put that in a Q&A document. And Anita, I see you put in the chat that you believe that literacy and digital literacy specifically is a human right in order to participate in society, the workplace, and life in general. I strongly agree with you. And having said that, I would invite each of you that if there are particular statements that you would like to make, that you would like me to incorporate into the report that I send, I would love to receive those because obviously each of you has a lot of insight and experience to offer, and I would like to take full advantage of that. So what I will say in closing is that, and I think we're all in agreement on this, that we feel that this work needs to continue, and that is the message that I think we want to share with the broader community, is that this is essential. I mean, when you talk about digital skills as a human right, I think that really, thank you, Anita, I think that really encapsulates this. Okay, I realize it's 3:05. Thank you all very, very much for this, for attending and for being a part of this project. Yes, Lisa.
Oh, I think the project is wonderful, and I really hope that there is some opportunity to apply for other funding. I just have one comment that's kind of irrelevant, but I've wanted to say it all day because we kept talking about QR codes. I just watched a public safety announcement from the police on QR codes that some places like parking, when you have to pay for parking and they put a QR code. Well, what's happening is people are putting a fake QR code up and directing people to another site where they're paying, where you put in your personal information, your paying information. It's not going to the parking place. People are getting tickets and now their credit cards have been compromised too.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
awful.
just something to think about when we talk about QR codes. Not that I just thought, oh, we've talked about it a couple times today, and I just wanted to mention that because I had never thought about that, but I just wanted to know that that was actually a police broadcast that's been occurring.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you for
Not
pointing that out.
It's just something to think about if we ever have to do digital literacy again, but I thought I would just say it because we talked about it couple of times today, because with QR codes, and we use them all the time at the college. So I never really thought about putting your personal information on them too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, we don't ask for
Thank you for
credit cards
that.
though.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for allowing us to participate in this. And I really sincerely hope that this continues because I think we just barely have, it's a drop in the bucket, what we've done so far. I think the need is so great and so vast. And I sincerely hope that the government sees fit to continue this programming because I think it's really, really needed, and it's changing so rapidly that we really do need to have this continuous providing of programming.
Absolutely. If we can find any way to continue it either through, this particular type of federal funding or through others, we'll be all over it because now we have some really great data to share in terms of having to compete for funds. So yeah, thank you.
And some of our participants, my cyber seniors are, they're all very educated women, actually, retired nurses and teachers, etc. And they are willing to speak to whomever in order to plead our case. So bear that in mind, please, if you need us.
Definitely will. I just want to
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
Jeremy for
Yes.
managing the project because it was a big one and lots of partners, lots of moving parts. So thanks very much, Jeremy.
It's been my absolute pleasure, truly. It's been an honor to do this, and it's been an